It's objectively aggressive.
Okay. Yeah, I see. I see.
People always ask, all these damn people always ask, people always ask, all these damn questions, people always ask, all these damn questions, all these damn questions, people always ask, all these damn questions.
People always asking me all these damn questions, and they so confused. I don't know what to tell them. Why he do this? Why he do that? How you do this? How you do that? Hell yeah, I'm trying to do what I want, and I get good grades. That's why I wear these hats with A's. These people recognize that's why they stay up in my face. Cause
people always ask all these damn questions. People always ask all these damn questions.
they wanna know.
Hey, welcome back.
Yes, sir.
Season 4, Lighthouse.
All
It's been a
day.
minute, man. I feel like it's been like a month, maybe.
Hey, man, sometimes you got to give the brain a break, you know?
For sure. I do find that as much as I don't want to do that, I know I need to do it. And
Got to give it a break.
speaking of which, wanted to give a disclaimer. We will, of course, get into some very high level things, but we also want it to come across as layman as possible. So it's just barbershop talk, kind of to a certain extent. And so our back and forth is just for us to get. Sometimes we're having introspection at the moment. So allow us some grace to get up there and then try to bring it back down. So, I normally kind of start this off with a sweet serenade, and so, Doc, how you been, man? Like, and I only say that like I feel like season 4 is we're gonna dig real deep, like we always do. I want to talk about triple consciousness, and the reason I'm talking triple consciousness is I want to hone in on a conversation we were talking about between the Northern Negro and the Southern Negro, and we're spinning off of a W.E.B. Du Bois double consciousness or dual consciousness, and how one black person would exist. Now we understand that W.E.B. Du Bois got this consciousness after coming down from being a Northern Negro and seeing the Southern Negro. But some stuff we recently seen and we talked about, and I've done some researches to see that it seemed like there were only two paths for the Negro after the Civil War and the Reconstruction, and so it seemed like the architects for this was W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, but their theories or their frameworks kind of clash. What you got, Doc?
No, and I think of it in a sense of our from a phenomenological perspective, how our lived experiences affect our outlook on the world. And so when you talk about your lived experience, what you see sometimes is my lived experience may look like your lived experience. And then we have a shared experience. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk to me about terms, I think, we always start with definitions. I think it's important to note that when I say black people, I say it in the sense that black people have never referred to themselves as black people. We were called black people, but we never said we're black people. And so because the label of blackness has been so affected to us, it has split the consciousness because we're still just people. At when it's all said and done, we're just people. And the color of our skin was only created to delineate our experiences from people. And so we have to reconcile why it was split, what it was split for, and more importantly, how to connect the split. And I think that connection starts with a Southern Negro, a Northern Negro, and the lived experiences are different. And I think the biggest difference is the culture that we were raised in dealt with us in different ways. And so from a Northern perspective, what often gets missed is Jim Crow started in the North. Most people think it started in the South, but they didn't need Jim Crow in the South because they had chattel slavery. So segregated transportation, segregated schools were already happening up north. And so when we start to look at the manifestation of the same phenomenon, it's the same issue to me. So I don't delineate it from a phenomenological perspective. I only delineate it and define it from a research perspective, because I can't research the phenomenon without definitions first. And when we define,
Oh, go ahead, please.
And so when we define blackness, we have to go back until its earliest use. The first time that people of African descent were referred to as blacks were by the Greeks. Kemet meant the land of the black soil, or the black. It wasn't the people, it was the soil. And so the soil of the people who were black became associated with the people of the black land. And so the black land became associated with the black people, because blackness in and of itself minimizes, and it does not encapsulate the cultural difference of people who have black skin but don't have the same shared experience.
So here's what I'm because I'm hearing you, I'm unpacking that, but the last couple of sentences, not to be a reductionist, but quickly, like it seems like just because you look alike does not mean that you have all the shared experiences.
Exactly.
Okay.
And not just the shared experiences. What we see is that because we look alike, we get lumped into the same category. And the expression, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, right? Because we don't see the unity created because we don't have the same struggles. So I'll give you an example. You familiar with the Underground Railroad?
Yes.
So the Underground Railroad started in the South, and its termination point was in the North.
Yeah.
And there was also really a Underground Railroad that went to Mexico, and one that went to Florida. But along the path, you had challenges of not knowing how to fit in places where you've never left before. Or I don't know what it is like to be free because I don't know what free people do. I don't know the praxis of free people. And who teaches it to you? Like, who teaches you who taught you how to be free?
Yeah.
And who's supposed, what if your parents weren't free? So the question then becomes is we're still learning how to be free to this day. We're learning it. We are learning it, and we're trial by error. And so because we are the first generations, and maybe first and second generation, that could be rebellious. And a part of freedom is rebellion, because, we talk about praxis a lot, but what stops us from making our own practice is the law. And so the law tells you, if you want to stay free, you will do these things.
Hey, that's an interesting segue, because I start thinking about the difference between boundaries and barriers.
Yeah.
All right. Like from a personal standpoint, like you have to put up boundaries, and then if somebody crosses them, you say, "Hey, you crossed the boundary.
Yep.
Now I have to put up a barrier."
Yep.
Okay.
Barrier. Yep.
Right. Now, the reason I speak upon that is because it seems like, from the standpoint of, let's just say, being black and having blackness, you will put up certain boundaries and barriers for your experience.
Yes.
All right. Because you say, "Hey, I'm this type of person, or I'm that type of person," and you happen to be black or white, but we're talking about the black experience.
Yep.
All right. So I would say, okay, so for me, we're talking about free praxis, right? So for me, coming from the South, appearing free, but now looking back and understanding that there was a mentality that was sold to me in the South
Yeah.
with how to be productive. Like, what does the professional, Black Negro look like? And for
Yeah.
me, it looked like a line of, trying to get into some sort of HBCU,
Yeah.
pledging, right? Maybe becoming a Mason, right? And doing something in the community adjacent to said experience to make sure I'm being prominent. And now those two individuals that we talked about ended up, at the top, the hierarchy of we'll say Blackness on two different sides.
Yeah.
And mine sounds like it could have been more Booker T-ish, but my mind frame was
Yeah.
always more W.E.B. Du Bois. But even though I don't necessarily have the same, we'll say, shared experience, but for wanting enlightenment, thinking there's
Yeah.
something different. Maybe I was a Southern Negro put in Northern Negro situations,
Yeah.
right? Or I dealt with a bunch of people who are from the North, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so understanding that. So for me, I put up boundaries and barriers to say I wasn't just a certain type of Southern Negro.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And just so you know, I mean, it's not really talked about much, but the North was just as segregated, if not more, than the South.
Yes.
And because the North was segregated, you could essentially grow up and never see a white person in the North. You could go from 0 to 20 and not interact personally with the white person. And so culturally, you don't understand the dynamics. You don't understand that because they set the boundaries up north for you. They redlined you. They put you in these areas, in these certain limits where you couldn't buy houses and covenants in their contracts, and you couldn't move into this community. You couldn't do this, even the educated ones. So what we found is that when we start to look, a lot of focus was put on the Southern Negro as if to get integration, but a lot of stuff was neglected in the North. Because when when we were focusing on school integration in the 50s and 60s, but school integration didn't happen up north to the 70s and 80s.
Oh,
So I was the first generation of integrated schools in Cleveland, Ohio. They didn't integrate the schools until the mid 80s.
so speaking of which, I was not to this kind of goes into it. Can you speak to the high Black population around the Great Lakes?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And so it's the Rust Belt. So during the Great Migration, the largest immigration of Black people from the North from about 1900 to about after World War II, you had millions of Black people essentially escaping the South. And they were escaping the South because they didn't have jobs down there. They didn't want to be plantations anymore. There was fear of lynching. A Black dude would assault a white person, and then they got to leave out of town because if they didn't leave, they was going to be on a tree.
okay.
And then what we don't talk about is that the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan actually happened in the North. The resurgence of the Klan after the 1920s, after the birth of a nation movement, started in the North. There were more Klansmen in the North than in the South. And people don't talk about that because you didn't have as much attention on northern cities because of the history was we have to focus on the South and the conditions there where federal law, legislation, and essentially creating a situation where the white people in the South were more familiar with the Black Negro than was the white Northerner familiar with the Black Negro.
Right.
You have more familiarity. You probably went to school with white people, probably.
Oh, yeah. So if you're for me,
yeah,
absolutely. So I mean,
yeah.
even from like the elementary school, like even on the south side, southeast side,
Yeah.
there are a couple of white people there. Of course, you had white teachers from time to time, things of that nature. But once I hit 5th grade and I switched to like a magnet school, that's when it's essentially changed for me, and it became a more white and more half and half, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where a whole lot of more whiteness was appearing to me. And I say whiteness as a property, but around
Yeah.
Caucasian people
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. So I did grow up with white people.
And so you will have a situation where a lot of black people in the North are primarily, in the 35 to 45 age range, who probably didn't go to school unless they were like played football, got to a private school. So because of that gap, there was a lot of cultural things that you were not exposed to. Meaning, like, it wasn't necessarily about knowing people; it was about needing to know people. Like, if you don't grow up in the that 10-block radius of your house,
Right.
there's like a 10-block radius who's a kid. You were safe in that 10 blocks. And if everybody in that 10 blocks looked black or was black, and you didn't even have a consciousness of the white consciousness.
Right.
And so it's not until most of the time you get older that you even see that dual consciousness that Du Bois talked about. And when you see it for the first time, you start to ask yourself questions. Why does so-and-so does this and they get this result, but when I do it, this? Like, where is this? You start to ask yourself questions.
This was a thing. So of course, understanding that rebellion goes into what you were saying earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like rebellion is a theme.
Yeah.
Right? And rebellion comes more from people who are free.
Yes, you have to be free to rebel.
So here I am growing up between ages of 12 and 18 in a more mixed society, but it's still like middle class. But from where I was living, it was right there on the edge of being lower, but right there, right? Like right there. So you get to see the privilege and experience, but know that you don't have it type stuff, right? So I got to live there with white people, right? So I was experienced a certain life with certain white people who was experienced a certain life that could be looked at a certain way from other white people. Right?
Yeah, and I think that there's a tendency, I think, to sometimes generalize experiences to say that their two are the same. And I would say that culturally, you learn how to navigate earlier in the South. You learn how to navigate a little more because that familiarity produces a necessity for it. So I know how to be in white spaces. And when I say white spaces, these are spaces that are predominantly white, 90% plus, and you are the one or two black people in that space.
Token.
So when you're in a predominantly white space, you have to remember something, that you as a black person in a predominantly white space you have to not see, you are not otherizing yourself. Because like, it's like, where's Waldo? Like, one of these things are not like the other.
Right. So that's one of those things I've had to deal with pretty much my whole career, right? Being the only black person. And then once you realize that, like, hey, you might be the only voice for a said, represented class or non-represented.
And I think that that's unfortunate, because nobody should speak for a group. Because no white person in America speaks for all white people. Because ultimately, when a white person enters into a predominantly black space, the idea becomes different. The idea becomes be on your best behavior. The idea becomes be a good representative so this white person can take that there's good black people out there. Right. Because if we act a fool in front of these folks, they're going to go back and tell their people they acting a fool. So even if you're just one white person or a bunch of black people, that means depending on the circumstances, there can be times where there is this social pressure to essentially conform and to be more proper, or to not, lack of a word, show your ass,
Yeah. Like, okay, now let's take that, because we're using the word consciousness, and we've been, that article you sent me on cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
That goes into this particular conversation,
Yeah.
because we're talking about if you have a cognition of individuality,
Yeah.
you have an understanding of who you are
Yes.
in your mind,
Yeah.
or you've had a socialization. And please, you disagree with me all you want, Doc. You have a socialization that gives you this image or belief of who you are, and your actions are to line up with said,
Yeah.
right? And so if someone disagrees or tries to give you an idea that is not does not line up with your actions or belief,
Yeah.
there is going to be we call a punctuated event.
Yeah.
A punctuated event where a person is going to now feel the emotions of the
Yes.
conflicting idea. And
Oh,
when that
yes.
conflicting idea comes in, that person is going to try to reconcile what the difference is. All right. So depending on who the person is or who they said it, they're going to either assume that they meant what they said, or
Yeah.
they're probably going to find out what they really meant. But if it's in place and it goes against the action and belief, there's going to be a feeling of disdain, and the people are going to want to replace that feeling.
Yeah.
They're going to want to replace that feeling. Go ahead, Doc.
But if the tools are not provided to reconcile or replace that feeling, where does it go?
Well, so
What do I do with it?
what we're finding, according to that article, I mean, there's different paradigms,
Yeah.
and I could pull it back up, and I will actually, I want to, but understanding that what happens is if you get depending on the leverage,
Yeah.
right? Because we're talking psychological resistance now.
Yeah.
So depending on the source of information is going to depend on the credibility. Well, there's going to be a
Yeah.
credibility factor in the individual who hears it, and they have to decide whether it's credible enough to even give it merit. And if they do,
Yeah.
there's going to be a situation while the person is now trying to, like I said, reconcile the feeling either with information,
Yeah.
most likely information, and it's to take that what we call dissident idea
Yeah.
and put a one that they know to be true to get rid of that emotion. And so right there, that's where I'm finding where we're talking. That is the area of psychological resistance that people can put in the distortion. Go ahead.
But the goal, I think, and I'm going to use some different terminology, but to express the same idea.
Okay.
I think the goal is to create harmony or to be harmonious in your thinking. So if you listen to music, right, there's a beat and there's a rhythm, and you can rap on the beat.
Right.
And if you rap on the beat, you get into a rhythm, and
Right.
it's harmony and it sounds good.
Correct.
Dissidence messes up the beat. It messes up the beat. It's like boom, boom, clap. And then you like clap, boom, clap. No, it's boom, boom, clap. And so when something comes to interrupt the harmony, we must find out why is the harmony missing, and why is the missing. And so there's 5 ways to solve conflict of harmony. I can avoid you, I can accommodate you, I can compromise with you, I can collaborate with you, and I can use force or violence. That's it. Those are the 5 ways to resolve conflict. I can accommodate you, meaning, hey man, you're right, so I can be harmony. You're right, bro. Whatever you say is correct. Now I got harmony. I can just avoid you. If I don't see you, then I still have harmony. Mm-hmm. I can collaborate with you, which is me taking your idea, my idea, making one idea, harmony. I can compromise with you. I can let some of my snare go. I can let some of your bass drum go, and now we have a beat. And if last resort, I have to use force and or violence. And to your point about emotions are the force and the violence when you don't have the opportunity to hide anymore. When there's nowhere to go and I back you into a corner, I'm going to make you use violence.
Right. Power. So what I'm finding, power and force.
Yes.
Is a power and force to it. And so there's a consciousness that we exist in emotionally that's going to force a certain emotion.
Especially if you do not recognize it first. For example, I understand what produces disharmony.
Yeah.
For example, and sometimes I do it on purpose. Sometimes I don't. Like, for example, we were talking in the office about a movie, about Creed, right? The Creed movies.
Right.
And somebody in the office asked me what I thought about it. I said, yeah, the movie was good, but I didn't like the fact that they portrayed the Apollo Creed as a deadbeat dad. I don't like that iconography of portraying black men as if we are not there for our children. So instantly, they were just wanting me to just say, oh, it was a great movie, blah, blah, blah. But no, I was like, no, I'm going to mess up your harmony.
Yes.
Because I am not just going to go along with that statement. I'm going to make you see it from my perspective. And you weren't thinking about that.
Yeah.
But now that dissonance comes in. Why are black men portrayed like that in movies? What message are we trying to send? So I did that on purpose. Now I could have not done that. I could have just let it go and said, oh, great movie. Love the action. Great,
Right.
But I wanted to
disrupt the harmony.
I wanted to disrupt the harmony, and that is when we read that article. That's when cognitive dissonance is used to force growth. Yes. I'm going to force you to grow because I see that you're not growing as a liability, and I will take the chance of getting off beat with you in order for you to catch your own rhythm. Because what I'm learning is I can play you a song, but when the song is over, can you play it for yourself?
Yeah.
And that is where I think some of that challenge comes. And the difference is trying to be harmonious with people who are designed or intending to disrupt your beat.
And so what I'm with all of that, because we can find a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm finding, that's what I told you. So I had to go back. On Salt and Riot. And of course I wanted to, and I appreciate, some conversations we have going back, but it made me look at, speaking of music, it made me look at, the 7 levels of consciousness again, right? Which started pointing me to frequency, and I found light, and of course, but been there, but looking at it differently.
Yeah.
And so when I look at these 7 levels of consciousness now, I'm looking at my colors, because I have the colors, and I'm looking at red and orange and seeing that they're the most low vibrational, with the anger and apathy and stuff. And then it moves into orange, where that's where the ego is, where you have all this ego. I can name the words, but that's where pride is right below, right above, and all that. Right. So I'm noticing that there are 7 levels, but it looks like 8, because there's a supposed split right around the goal area, right? Because there's pride and there's courage, and then there's split. So it looks like 8, but it's only 7. And come to find out, this is what the musical scale looks like as well, right? With the octave.
A, B, D,
at the 7th and 1/4, right? 7 and 1/4 for the scales, right? So you're scaling up.
Yeah. You're
scaling up in your consciousness and your vibration, but you have to recognize, like you said, you would have to recognize the incoming situation, or the stimuli to say, okay, this is making me do this, or making me feel like this, and I don't want to, but what am I having to reconcile right now? And I think people don't want to reconcile. They want to replace it because of, like we said, the laws that which govern us. If we're breaking it in our mind through action and belief, and somebody disrupts that, we want to get back within what we think is law. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and that's where I think the biggest that I've seen is the difference between belief and knowledge. Because I tell people all the time, you can't believe something and know it at the same time. Because if I know it, I don't need to believe it. And if I believe it, I don't know it. So when we separate those two ideas, I have categories of things that I believe because I have no evidence for my beliefs, because I'm taking usually them on faith, or I'm taking them at face value, that I'm just accepting them because I don't have knowledge in the current moment. So the belief is a placeholder. It's just there to hold my seat until knowledge sits down. And once knowledge sits down, belief can go about its way. And so when I talk to people, it's like, you're about to propose to get married, right? Now you believe she's gonna say yes.
Right.
You believe it. You don't know she's gonna say yes. Now you might know it, but some people don't know 100%. They're just going on faith. They're hoping, believing, trusting it's gonna happen. Now, when you get on one knee and pull that ring out, you're going to confirm that belief. And that belief will enter into the realm of knowledge, which either good or bad,
Bad.
and it will create harmony. Now,
Yeah.
if that belief is validated, hopefully you've done some research and you are out here just like on the first date, like, I want to marry you. That's going to be weird. That's not going to be harmonious.
Right.
Because that's going to create cognitive dissonance. So what you want to do, go ahead.
Well, I like that, because that goes into like this thought of like when you're married, like the happy wife, happy life thing, or happy spouse, happy house. But it starts off because, I won't say but the experience is, right, you want to try to de-escalate a situation. So us as men, I would say me, in situations that don't require a whole lot of emotion, you're the person trying to make sure I'm trying to make sure I'm managing emotion, because I know that I'm the person that has to.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's where the thing is that it's saturation. My tracking system can track 10 missiles. All I got to do is shoot 11 missiles at it. Emotions are the same way. And if all I got to do is keep plugging away at it, and if I keep plugging away at it, and I'll tell you, when I form conclusions as a result of processes that become immutable to me. Meaning, like, I want to change things. I don't want a fixed ideology. I want an ideology that's flexible enough to bend when it needs to, so that when I enter into a situation, I can create syncopation, or I can create symbiotic relationships with anybody's rhythm. So like right now, I'm in your rhythm. This is your rhythm. So I want to be in your rhythm, and I can't be in your rhythm if I come with my own beat.
Yeah, it's almost like, I want to use the word serendipitous for me, right? It's you're allowing your experience and your education to allow you to be able to live in the present and not
Yes.
fit in structure, because life, you can be like that with your habits and practices, but like Mike Tyson said, and I hope he hits the crap out of Jake, right? You everybody got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And what you're seeing is, we're getting to a point where, all right, here we go. We can get caught up in things like social media or what other people are saying to create these rigid thoughts of the way we're supposed to be, or we're trying to get to this result of success.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can be rigid in our thought and what it takes to do that.
Yeah.
And so as we're building this by listening to, we'll say, cognitive bias, and especially to something that seems easy, right? Because I feel like the internet now has got us to such an instant gratification, state of mind. It's like we can't even process emotion properly.
That's fair. Yeah.
We can't properly process emotion because I know part of me, I used to be one of them kids who wanted to be the first one to finish a test. So it's almost like having the best answer fast is like something for me, right? So now, but throughout this journey, like with you, it's like it's not about having the fastest answer.
Yeah.
Unless you need to, unless it's life or death.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's like it's like society does not truly allow you to digest your emotion for you to make the best decision.
Yeah, and that's where I'm not really concerned with what somebody is saying as opposed to what I am hearing. So So I accept that saying the word best is subjective. So I will now say the most effective answer, the more appropriate answer, because the best answer, because if you look at the etymology of the word best, it means lesser. Did you know that? Yeah.
Right,
That's
right,
why
right. It means lesser because you're gonna have few. It's just like standard deviation, right?
people say when I was growing up, it was the best time of my life, meaning they're going back. It's the best time in my life because I had to go back. It's a retraction. When I look at the idea is a cognitive bias is to think that the time you grew up in is the best time. That's a bias.
Oh, okay.
To say, well, the best generation was the 80s. Well, of course you think that because that's when you grew up.
Right.
They say the same thing about every generation is the best generation. So my concern isn't what's the best anymore. It's what's the most effective. And I'm not as concerned about creating harmony directly because I can indirectly create harmony by frequency and energy to that chakra level. I think you're talking about. Like chakra.
Yeah.
So I was at work and a coworker came up to me a couple last week and said, "Hey, I totally misjudged you." And you know it's and I felt to myself like I said, you know, it's okay. It happens a lot, you know, because I wanted to validate. I said it happens a lot. And when she said it let me know something that I did not go out of my way to do anything for this person or show them anything. I just did what I did at the level I do it at. And the level I do it at is a high level. And you have to understand and respect that. Because I do it at a high level. Consistently. And you're going to see my consistency. You're going to see that my diligence, and you're going to see that my scholarship. If you want to fight the scholarship, to your point earlier, go fight the research. Because the messenger is just a vessel. It's just a shell. It's the message that is important. And so when they said that to me, my first thought was it was validating because I know I make it a point to not purposefully be in disharmony with anyone. But if you want to come mess up my beat, my octaves are on a level you can't even get there. Like my octave, like I'm playing at I'm on like God, I'm on God tone. You know what I'm saying? Like you, I'm playing like Beethoven. I'm playing like Beethoven's 7th Symphony, and you're like, I don't know what kind of is it the French horn going? I don't know. And so when you start to operate at that level, people see it and they say, wait a minute. Why is he the way he is? Why doesn't he go around throwing his titles around? Because he don't have to. I don't have to tell you what I am. I'm going to show you what I know. And then I'm going to let you approach me because I'm too busy concerning myself with my frequency and my harmony to be concerned about who and what anyone thinks of me.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking. That. That's good. I'm glad it is validating when you know that you're vibrating different and you know that you might actually be a lone wolf. And I say lone wolf only because most people were getting back to that best, right? And when I heard you say best, I was thinking about like the normal standard distribution.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're at the people at the top, the bestest, right? There's only a certain amount of people up there, fewer.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so
yeah, and that was I think when we were talking about the idea of reverence, you know, what it brings back to my mind is it's like I can show you better than I can tell you. I can show you better than I can tell you. Because I think there's a tendency to attribute things to people that they should take no credit for. Like, for example, if you show me a perspective and a way of seeing things that I did not previously see, the best way for me to show you reverence is to change my behavior and to incorporate your ideas into mine. That's the best way to show reverence to me. Because it says I adopt what you said, I hear what you're saying, and now I'm going to actions. I'm going to take actions based on the information, right or wrong. Because when you start to see it, you'll find that it's harder the higher you go to not have the not say the time, but it's the understanding to invest in the energy, to your point, and vibrations, to invest it where you don't see it the most effective, not the best, the most effective. Like, what is the most effective use of my time? How is my time used the most effectively? Because that's how I show my reverence.
Right.
I show my reverence by what I give my time, my energy, my money, my finances. That's reverence to me. Because a lot of people play lip service and they say, oh, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, no. And it's like, even going to the scripture, it was like, God says, look, man, he says, you honor me with your lips, but your heart is going somewhere else. And right. I think about that a lot of times because people sometimes can get caught up in that affirmation, wanting to hear things. Like, I don't want to hear nothing from anybody. I'm not concerned what anybody thinks about me personally. If you like me or don't like me, that's your opinion. But I'm not using it as a metric to that point of that Pareto distribution principle. I'm not using it for a sense to get some type of esteem or some type of drive, because I know, I wouldn't say I believe, but I do know that if you plant things in a good place and you do what you need to do, it will produce after itself. So if I'm putting out positive energy, if I'm putting out, if I'm investing my time in people, like I'll tell you, man, a lot of people don't realize this, man, but when you get to a certain thing, man, people want things from you. They do. They want, hey, man, that's like, hey, and I'm available, but I tell people, I said, I'm here to show you how to get it, not to do it. You know what I mean? And I think when some people see that, it's like, as much resistance as you want to put up, it becomes less reverent because I'm giving it for free. Like, I'm not charging nobody nothing. This is free.
Right.
And so if you put resistance up to it, and somebody's like, if somebody's coming to give you some free water, and you like, where did water come from? You like, wait, hold up. It's like, man, it's like, don't take the water. I'll give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think of it that way because so often people create idolatry in people. Like they look to people as like some kind of like deity. It's like, no, bro. It's like, ain't nothing nobody know can't be known by somebody else.
That's what right. But it's one of those things where I'm finding that people love to use other people as motivation.
Yeah.
Which is a form of mastery. Mm-hmm. But when the apprenticeship is over, people don't know how to separate from the apprenticeship, therefore probably creating an adultery.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, since you were supposed to break off, I think I would then speculate, be a hypothesis, that the disdainment or the jadedness comes by not being able to create said own framework, because you're supposed to split off. You're supposed to branch off.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, said familiarity breeds contempt. The closer you are to people, the more critical you can see them. It's no different than trying to stare at the sun or trying to be close to the TV. You're going to get a distortion because proximity blinds you to other variables.
So this is where I would have a conversation about myopia. Yeah. That word myopia being so important. And it wouldn't necessarily be a negative thing. It would be incentive, just like we were saying, to take a step back, because the emotional situation, which we are discussing as catharsis, what we would say catharsis would be the process of the emotion, right? Yeah. Going through it
to cleanse the lens.
Right.
Catharsis catharsis removes the distortion, but it's an emotional process, and it can be very challenging.
Right, but this is where we would speculate that through catharsis is where there's a figurative, like, removing and replacing of things to help clean up, and it could be wrong information, but it's just to self-satisfy.
Yes.
Right.
And if you learn how to create catharsis, because sometimes I we when we say distortion, I think it has the tendency to look at it from a it's like a negative word.
Right.
And I think that sometimes if we look at a distortion as negative, we don't see the utility of a distortion. So for example, until you get to a certain grade, you can't do algebra until you learn arithmetic, subtraction, division, multiplication. So I'm going to distort algebra from you until you learn these principles. And then once you get these principles, you can go on to the next principles.
Right.
And then eventually, once you graduate, you're going to take the principles and apply them to areas that I am not focused on. So for example, my research focus, because I am a scholar practitioner, meaning I practice the field in which my scholarship is in. Like some people go to school for engineering or something, or psychology, but you work at a bank.
Right.
And you could do that, but my field is in what I study. So because I practice what I study, I can get data real time. Right. I can see the punctuations before they happen.
Right.
Because I study what creates the punctuation. Right. That's what I study. That's what I focus on. So if I tell you that I see a punctuation coming, of course you won't see it. You're not supposed to see it because that's not what you study. If you don't study how things are punctuated. So when somebody sees a punctuation coming, it's like you're in a situation where it's like, okay, you're in a maze, and somebody who's been through the maze, because the maze is just one maze, and they've been through the maze, and they're telling you this is the quickest way through the maze. And you're like, no, okay, that's the quickest way, but I want to just explore the maze because I just like mazes. Then that's great. Well, when you're done exploring, come talk to me.
Well, okay, so it's almost one of those things, where you're like, hey, let's just say you're a labyrinth expert.
Yes, the labyrinth.
and you're here to come look at this place that they call a maze. And you say, hey, I'm a labyrinth inspector, right? I just want to take a look around. I was like, well, all right, well, I can tell you the quickest way through the maze. He was like, but I'm here to inspect the labyrinth, right? Yes. But so there's a disconnect, right?
Yes.
And so that's what it feels like. But here's what I was saying, right? Because you're let's just say you're smart enough to know that you're the labyrinth inspector, but not smart enough to know that you need to get down to that person's level and now explain to them that a labyrinth could be considered a maze or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say when we talk about distortions, that's why this new line exists now, right? Because it's like the distortion is it's like when you wake up and you're trying to, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that's a distortion is just not being able to focus at that time.
Yeah, and there's an ancient proverb that goes like this. It says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think of that very powerful because we're all students. We're all students of something. Right. We're students, and hopefully we are the type of student that understands what we don't know. Because I'm the first to tell you when I don't know something, but I'm going to look it up first. I'm going to find out about it as much as I can. But then I'm going to go to the subject matter expert. I have a legal question. I don't study the law like that. I'm not like, I know enough to be dangerous, but I ain't like a, so if I have a legal question in case law, I might go to a lawyer, but then I might go to a second lawyer because the first lawyer was graduated at the bottom of his class. But so the term of labyrinth inspector is one thing, but then you can become a labyrinth builder. See, and I see that a lot of times when I talk to you, sometimes it's like you want to build a labyrinth. You're like a labyrinth. You want to build a labyrinth. It's like you You want to build one, and it's like, because the ones you've been through, it's like, I don't like this. But then it's like, okay, I need to understand, if I'm going to build a labyrinth, I need to know what framework or what conceptual ideas is at the end of it. So if somebody asks me a question, like people ask me a lot of questions about like
People
life,
always asking.
like philosophy. Yeah, philosophy and life. And, I start off with the Socratic method, because I think the Socratic method is the best way to teach people, because it allows them to examine their thinking. Like, I don't want you to examine my thinking. I want you to examine your thinking. And the only way I can examine your thinking is by asking you questions about why you think that. And I'll keep asking questions until we get to a point where you don't know something. And then when you don't know it, then we can go find out. But it ain't my job to find out why you don't know what you want to know. It's not my job, but I can orient you in the right direction. I can say, hey, I've been down this particular labyrinth. Like because we act like there's only one labyrinth we go to at a time. Going back to that consciousness piece, we go down many labyrinths, and I can say there are some that I've been down, and they're treacherous. It's like there's sharks ahead, and there's lions, and there's savagery, and there are people here to beat you, and there's murderers on the way, and there are people here to rob you, and there's all.
Sounds like the local news.
Yeah, it's treacherous, right? And so since it's treacherous, you need some tools in that labyrinth to make sure you don't get lost or disoriented or distorted, because if you get distorted, you might hit danger that could be avoided. And some people like that, though.
Yeah.
They like that. They want to be dangling the lion's den. Right. They like the idea of challenging their ideas, but my concern is to what end? Because if my foundation is not solid, like a tree, then I'm going to not be able to withstand challenges that come my way, and I will be discouraged.
Well, I mean, I like that, but for a couple of reasons. It's getting back, because again, the disclaimer is, just because we talk about a lot of things and it seems like we're not talking about our subject, we are.
Yeah.
Because understanding that we are multiple different things, but could be tried to be labeled as one, right? Like a labyrinth builder a future labyrinth builder who is in the job or profession of being a labyrinth inspector.
Yeah.
Working with people who work in mazes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's deep, right? But it's like, when you think about the triple consciousness, I'm going back to it, right? It's what one would want in life once you look back on it and it's all said and done. Because if you let's think about Moses for a second, right? Yeah. Ooh, I don't know if this makes you excited when you start talking about stuff like this, but it does me, because I know that you know a lot about it, right? So when I think about Moses was a triple threat to me, because he was mentioned in all three of the major religions, right? Like, he's mentioned as a prophet in all three of them. Mm-hmm. But to know that he went from, the royalty in Egypt to a shepherd, then to the liberator, that's three different consciousness.
Yeah, and then I think when you look at the character of Moses, you got to see the archetype. Moses is an archetype.
Yes.
And when you see the archetype, what I've seen is that some people don't know how to operate in multiple archetypes. Meaning I'm on the hero journey right now. Meaning I am on the explorer journey. Right. And when you see your archetype, it's easy to create a harmony of consciousness of who I am, who I want to be, where I'm going, and ultimately somebody who has foreknowledge. So throughout the ages, we've always called people with foreknowledge names. Sometimes we call them prophets. Sometimes we call them judges. Sometimes we've called them wise men. Sometimes we've called them philosophers. Sometimes we've called them doctors. We've called them names because they had knowledge that was not ordinary to everyone else. It may have been extraordinary to some people. Like right now on the 8th of April, there's going to be an eclipse. Now, why is that important? Because psychologically, there was a battle in Pydna. It was the last battle, major battle between the Romans and the Greeks. Now, the Romans had an astrologer called the Magi who knew that this was going to happen. And he warned the army that this is an omen of the gods, and it meant that we are going to be victorious in this battle. So he gave the troops foreknowledge, so they were going into battle with a courage that God was on their side. Now, the Greeks didn't have this. So the Greeks saw it. It was a blood moon. The Greeks saw this as a sign of their doom and that they were fated to destruction by an astrological sign. Now, because the Romans had this knowledge, they could use that knowledge to give to the people to encourage them. And the Greeks now are afraid, knowing that they're going to be savage. Now, the blood moon is very significant because it symbolizes a lot of things, primarily the animal nature in man, like the wolf. It releases a beast in us.
Okay.
And so when they understood that, now, of course, the Romans won that battle. And that was the battle that signified Rome taking over the Hellenistic culture. That is a very significant event. So like even today, if you did not know that this eclipse was going to happen and I knew about it and I told you it was going to happen, you might think I was some kind of prophet. But it's going to be on the news.
Right.
And so because we have knowledge this way, to use the figure of Moses, and I say Moses is an archetype, because once again, the Kemetic knowledge, the 10 Commandments, I told you, the 10 Commandments came from Kemet. There were 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. They took 10 of them, and those 10 became the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt have no other gods. That all originated in Kemet.
Right.
But that is not even debatable. What is concerning to me is that when people don't use the story as it was intended, meaning the story of Moses, they called Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was called Moses. You know that? One of her names was Moses. They called her Moses because she delivered the people from bondage to the north. So the character isn't stuck to a book anywhere.
Right. It's a archetype.
It's an archetype. So anybody who is delivering somebody from any situation of bondage can be a Moses.
Hey, quick question. What was the seventh commandment? What was I think that's adultery, but I feel like there from the Kemet times, I feel like there was a original meaning to that commandment, and I'm trying to figure out if you know it or not.
I'm not talking about, no. So I do know that they did combine the idolatry one and the making graven images. They did remove that one because the Catholic Church didn't like that commandment, so they kind of got rid of that one.
Which one was it?
I think the second commandment about making engraved images. They don't make no images.
Right. Okay.
So all those statues you see of the angels and all that stuff, all that was forbidden.
Right.
So they weren't supposed to make any statues or imagery. But one of the things that I'm seeing when you start talking about consciousness and the splitting, I think it's called the searing of the conscious, meaning that it takes pressure to rip a conscious apart. So when you ask people, what language did the Africans speak when they came to America from Africa? And say, what language did they speak?
It would depend on what particular country they were from. But
they got the majority of the enslaved people from one specific part of Africa.
Right. So we have to, yeah.
They got them from one specific, and they spoke a language. And you know why we're never told what language they spoke?
Well, that's a good point.
Because if they tell us what language it spoke, it might help you see your identity.
Exactly.
So you've heard the song, Kumbaya, my Lord.
Yep, Kumbaya.
You know what the origin of that song is?
African, I would
It's
say.
Hebrew.
Oh.
Yah, kumbaya in Hebrew is Father protect me. Kumbaya is a Hebrew saying. So why were enslaved people on plantations singing a Hebrew song? It wouldn't make any sense. Why are we singing a Hebrew song? And why are we teaching Hebrew and passing it down? Because they couldn't read or write, but they could have an oral tradition. They had an oral history of remembering it. Your DNA remembers who you are, whether you do or not.
Right.
And so when I start to talk to people, I'm always mindful that the greatest distortion in our consciousness is we don't know our history. That's the greatest distortion that we have.
Absolutely.
Because Marcus Garvey said that the tree without no roots ain't going nowhere. And I don't care how many consciousnesses you have, if you don't know where you come from or what traditions or customs your people had done or tradition have done, then you will adopt the customs and the traditions of people who do not have your interest in mind. Which is why, if you go back into Moses and the story in the Bible, when it says, when you go into the lands of these people, do not do their practices, do not do their customs, do not follow their traditions, follow my word. And so when you start to understand how the archetype is used, you have people who think that I have to connect to this identity from these people, but I don't have the ability to create my own. And that is challenging to me. And I don't know the answer to that question, because I think it's not a group question. Because like there's a passage in Chronicles that says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray, turn from their wicked ways, I will forgive their sins and heal their land, essentially, right? Now, so when you read that, the first thought is, if you ain't his people, it don't apply. and what does it mean to be called by the name? Because if I call you out your name, then I'm not calling you by his name.
Right.
So the tradition, the reason that your last name is what it is, it ain't because your family last name. It's because some people who owned your family had that last name and they gave it to you. So I can't even call you by your name. I can't call you by your name because I'm calling you because the tradition of taking the name of your enslaver came from the Roman traditions. It was the Roman customs when you were granted manumission because you didn't have a last name. You were just Bob, Joe, Smith, or whatever. When you were given your freedom, you were manumitted, meaning given your liberty, and you would have a surname. You would just take the last name of your owner or your previous owner or the owner of the estate that you were from.
Right.
That was a custom.
Right.
We just adopted that custom and traditions of the Romans. That's all we done. It's nothing new under the sun.
Everything appears new because if we've never truly experienced it, and you don't flatten time and learn history.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you potentially fall for anything.
And if you look up the etymology of what a historian is, it's a very interesting word, because a historian is a learned person. It's a learned person. So what did you learn?
Right.
And when you start to look at history, historia is stories. It's the stories of learned people. So I'm studying the stories of those who had learned the most. So when we talk about Du Bois, we're studying the history of a learned person, because he was the one who conceptualized these ideas, and we can grow upon them. Because like right now, you conceptualize the third consciousness. Right now, is there literature on it? I'd say, let's see. But if it isn't, it can be created. But when I talk to people, my concern is not to confuse people, because I'm very careful about adding language without understanding the current language. Like, we're creating terms intellectually and not explaining the current terms to people currently. And that creates a divide, because I can explain to you two things because I can show you one and another. Now, that hybrid mentality, I think it's a hybrid idea. It's like I'm taking the best of both worlds and I'm combining them together and making a trinary. Instead of a binary, I got a trinary, got my triangle. And when I find with my triangle, this is a stronger structure because we can go up different sides of it and still reach the same apex. And that is what I think is happening in our culture today, is we are finding different ways to climb the pyramid. But as we climb it and as we reach an identity, it creates an animus. It creates enmity against a system that benefits from ignorance. And if it benefits from ignorance, enlightenment becomes dangerous.
That is very, very, very powerful way to end that last statement. I would say for time purposes, we'll let that be the end of that one. You're right. You're right. That's why you're the good doc. I would say from that perspective, like the Romans and all that. So we're an empire and of some sort.
Yes.
And we're talking money. And so I wanna talk. I know I think I've been talking high yield savings accounts, but I know there's like 5, but I got 2 right now. Capital One, I believe, is doing one, and SoFi, right? So this is, SoFi has, I'm not branding them, but I'm just giving people the opportunity to know that other mechanisms of holding your money out here exist to get more money. And so, and I was saying Robinhood does that as well. So I'm just talking about ways people can make more money. Look at that. A high yield savings account. There you go. Right. And so my book Mastery, it's raining here, storming. The book Mastery again. Robert Greene. Yeah, I think this book is a good book to read because it can give understanding to emotions of why you go through certain things in life for so long, and understanding that if you put yourself in a position of learning, like we said, like getting into that apprenticeship, like being a historian and being learned and knowing that takes time. Yeah. And then again, flattening time and knowing that there is the instant gratification for success is actually more longer than you think.
Yeah.
Right. And so the book Mastery gets you in the mind frame to say, hey, it's going to take time to build your greatness.
Yeah. And I would say, man, we are in inflationary times. The cost of living is increasing, and most people's paychecks are not. And so when it comes to an issue of necessity, I think that we're going to see, if there's any trouble in America, it will be precipitated by financial issues. And I don't think it makes sense we're being individually prudent economically, but it won't matter if they just keep printing a bunch of money. Right. Because every time they print a dollar, the dollar you have loses value. And so when it comes to assets and value, what I like to think is storing up things now at times where you can hedge some of that inflation, whether it be food, whether it be canned goods, whether it be anything that you like, whether it be cigarettes, alcohol. If you like something and you got a little extra money, buy extra bottle of it because it'll go up and you might be able to sell it for money one day. And so my book tip, I will do my article. So we did bring this, we talked about, this can be found online.
Okay, yeah.
Introduction to cognitive dissonance theory.
I wish I should be able to put this in the comments.
Yeah, this is a great article. Man, I say, I will say this, man, before I met you, I really wasn't into this whole cognitive stuff because that ain't really what I focus on. It ain't really what I study but it's helpful because it helps me understand the equilibrium a little better. Mm-hmm. And I think that, psychology and equilibriums are so important because I told you before, I'm learning now with you personally, like I don't know how to balance the equilibrium if it's punctuated anymore. I can say that. I don't know because I want you to not be able to.
Right.
Like I want you to not be able to. And I know I can't control it. I know it's like, hey, the equilibrium's been punctuated. Let's see what happens. And we're learning and we're experimenting with that. And so as the equilibrium is punctuated, I'm mindful that it's nothing you control once it becomes parity. It's like if I'm playing chess with somebody, if I keep playing with you long enough, you'll become a better player.
Right.
But you got to play with better players to become a better player.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm learning.
Well, so of course I'm learning a lot of things too. First of all, gosh, like it's a I want to say the word humbling experience. It's humbling in the fact that a person like me would crave for somebody to be able to be in a situation where there's a fluid event of learning and exchange of ideas and a challenge, right?
Yep.
Because I come as I'm becoming more of the research practitioner, scholar practitioner, right?
Yep.
Understanding that my bold assertions come behind the research, right?
Got to.
It comes behind the research instead of the intuitive thought of knowing.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And that's a good point because it's form too, because there are times when you're using credibility as opposed to information.
Right.
Like I am the source. It's my research that I did. Now, I always find it interesting to tell somebody this is my research because it sounds like what?
Yeah, right.
It's like what? You got research? It's published.
Yeah.
I was on the internet, man. I ain't gonna lie. I had a moment, man. So once you publish your dissertation, I saw that somebody had cited my research in their work. And I feel like as a researcher, there is no greater
there it is.
than having another researcher cite what you wrote.
Right.
And their research.
Right.
It's like now it's like your research is growing and you ain't even know what you don't even know. It's like when I was in Japan, I would do stock market and the market would open up right when I open in the morning because the time difference.
Right.
So I wake up, I'm like, oh man, I got $800 today.
Yeah.
While I was sleeping, I got $800.
Right.
Like my stock went up, 10% while I was sleeping.
Right.
And I think of research the same way. It's like once your research is valid, not only will other people use it, they will need it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's like you can create the market because no one else understands the gap.
Right.
Like no one else understands this gap. Now I'm saying I don't plan on going too much further into the distortion theory because I know how I am. I'm like I like it, but I know where it leads sometimes because I see the equilibrium with it.
Right.
Because it when you take it to its logical conclusion, that's what I study, equilibriums.
Right.
When you take cognitive dissonance to its logical conclusion, it usually ends in violence. It usually ends in violence because when you get to a point where you are not being heard, but you need to be heard, and the people won't hear you, but they won't escape, you are going to create an environment where you're going to create friction. And you know what they say about pressure and pipes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where it becomes fascinating to me. And I'm looking forward to your stuff, man, because I know you got a lot to say, man. So I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I can tell you this, that if it wasn't going to be mentioned or cited, already congratulations, you know what I mean, of being cited.
Oh yeah.
Man, I was gonna have to show love, so you'll be in the lit review.
hey, no, but I tell you, and it's interesting now because one of the one of the things that I'm trying to say is that we get to a point where as we experience equilibriums being punctuated, it becomes addictive. It becomes, how do I punctuate the next equilibrium? Like, I'm at my job, bro, and I'm already like seeing the equilibriums. I'm like, okay, this needs to be punctuated. But I'm learning. I said, but I can't punctuate this one. I need someone to do it for me, because if I do it, it's not going to be I won't be able to restore it.
Hey, cat's paw. Now,
yes, cat's paw. That's 48 laws of power.
All right, hey,
I know the 48.
That's what the only reason. See, if you know, you know, right?
Yep.
If you know, you know. And so, you know, with that, I would say the final thought for this triple consciousness, which is a reach to get people to ask what double consciousness is.
Yep.
Right. So some of the titles need no explanation. Some of them are like triple or, you know, quadruple entendres. Well, you know, and that's my own fault, just because I live a life that I like complexity to be able to make simple, right? I even said in a song, I'm a quad threat, because most people would understand what a triple threat is. Quad threat, right? So understanding consciousness and how you want to exist in the world, how you exist in the world. It's about understanding location. But, you know, I think we spend a lot of time in the past, which could create depression. We spend a lot of time in the future, which can cause anxiety. But I don't think we understand what we're actually doing in the present. And understanding those consciousness, and I would say those frequencies and lenses of which we would have to approach life. And it's almost sad because you want it to be on auto tune.
Yeah.
Auto tune, almost like autopilot. You're taking in the sensories, you're taking in the inputs, and you're going with the flow that you need to punctuate the equilibriums you need to, but to be able to quickly replace them with what's needed.
Yes.
You would want to be able to replace them with what's needed so they can, or we can, move in conjunction together, because if not, it could be a forced cognitive dissonance moment. And we, like you said, Doc, the violence comes, right? But this is what, not we'll say, I won't say Nas, but I can talk about Nas. I would say Goody Mob, fighting for your spirit and your mind.
The dungeon.
Right. Right. So, and I come from that, right? So again, my consciousness comes from heavy Outcast, heavy Dungeon Family, heavy, you know what I mean? Goody Mob, Cool Breeze. So there was a level of consciousness there that was teaching me consciousness before I really recognized it, as I learned these other mechanisms of consciousness. But now I'm able to mesh them all, right? So, but I struggle if I were to think that I am every single one of those, right? Because I'm not. I'm just a collection of them. Like, my upbringing makes me understand it, but just because I came up on hip hop and I felt like there were similar shared experiences, that doesn't necessarily make me that right now, even though I feel the PTSD of it, right?
Oh yeah.
And I can choose, but if I choose, that's what ends up happening. I think, as a person like myself, if I'm black and I don't look like I want to look like an older black person, I can find myself looking like a younger black person. Oh, and I happen to listen to hip hop. Oh, and I happen to be cool. Oh, I guess I must vibrate a certain type of way. And then there's this perception. And then I get to punctuate in equilibrium by saying, oh, no. Oh, you think I'm what? Oh, yes, that might be true, but let's talk. And there's nothing else past that, because like you said, through consistency and the high level, the high intensity octaves that you're able to play that tune.
Yeah. Harmony.
For that long, right? It's almost, but I think the most impressive thing with being able to play that tune for so long, like me and you both know that, you know, at the end of the day, if we wanted to go, we could go for 3-4 hours on the stuff.
Yeah.
But time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think of it like as dexterity in fingers. When you're playing keys, you know, guitar, you need dexterity, and it's the dexterity that allows you. And I will leave it with this thought, man. You know, I think we're in a crisis of meaning. We are behind philosophically because we're losing belief at a rate of awareness. Because when I think of consciousness, I say awareness. It's almost interchangeable to me. When I'm conscious, I am aware, and there's different levels of awareness. And so I like to look at the people who've come before me who already saw the crisis coming before it got here. I look at Dostoevsky, I look at Kierkegaard, I look at Nietzsche, I look at Sartre, I look at Camus, and I look at what they have led us to, and the idea of existentialism, of crisis of meaning and consciousness of awareness. And when we start to look at how long it takes for an idea to take hold in generational, for people who have been withheld information. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he didn't say it as a triumph of a victory. He said it as a sad note. And as we start to see people, I would say, not losing faith anymore, as they're losing the idea that we have, this is the only life we have, meaningful wise. Like, we can believe there's other lives, and that's a belief. We don't know. There's no certainty. There's no evidence of it. It creates a pressure to make this current life more meaningful now. Right. It's like you're playing a game and there's no, if you die, there's no
reset button.
No reset. So it gives you an urgency of now that we've never really had before, because we've traditionally been sweet by and by people. We've been waiting for the sweet by and by. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, and you can do that. But I think this generation today is seeing what has happened historically, and they don't want what has come before them. And then they will forsake the people who raised them because they will think they didn't set them up for success. And I think it's unfortunate because it's levels of awareness, not tearing down of people. Like, the people who come before you may not have had as much awareness. And because they didn't have awareness, there's a tendency for people who have more awareness now to look at those who are not aware as being backward, as being, and I think that's unfortunate. And I would say that because of that idea of meaning, it's this idea that you can be an archetype if you want, or not if you want. And what we see happen is it's a transformative process for community. And I think therein lies our biggest or most significant challenge, and not just on a consciousness level, not on an awareness level, not on a philosophical level, is how will we create community in a world where some people are more aware than others? How will we create community? And community in the sense of a shared vision and shared ideology for our future. And that's so that's my final thought.
How do we get there?
I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. All right, well, for right now, if we can't answer that question right now, we can try to, but until then, I would tell people don't worry about it, which is the cue for the song.
He said, well, cross that bridge when we get there.
Exactly. But Doc, I appreciate it. We're gonna we'll roll into the end of the song. I'll ask you to pause till after so we can do our little debrief. Again, thanks for tuning in to Objectively Aggressive presents
The Lighthouse.
Yes, for sure. Podcast with a K. I'm KJ, Kalvin. You know, we got Dr. Ham, and we did it again. Season 4
All day.
in the books. In the books. Don't worry about it.
Hey, you already know who it is.
See it.
KJ.
I think both of the songs are
For all
appropriate.
those people in my business. Hey, don't worry about me. Hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air and I'm out this bitch, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air and I'm out this bitch. I'm leaving this
All right,
bitch
all
breakfast.
right.
Niggas for breakfast. Flow
Whoa, this almost
Shawty touching my necklace. The wrist is so costly.
That's so
My ear
crazy.
is so frosty. I'm shaking these haters off me. Keeping it cold like coffee. You banging this through your speaker, then the shit is off the meter. I ain't trying to pull with the bullshit like I'm a preacher. But Shawty, it's nice to meet you. Shawty say she a teacher and shit. I like brains, so Shawty, where can I reach you? Cause I'm sick with it. Slick with it, clear-headed with the dick. Quick with it, cause I'm sick with my lines. I'm quick with my mind. But at the same time, I get sick of these hoes. I'm sick from the dough, but shit, you already know. Cause these people always asking me all these damn questions. And I don't lose, so I guess I am the champion. Catch me on this beat, yes, I'm sealing and stamping it. You don't like it, you can't stand it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air and I'm out this bitch, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air. Now I already got my chick, you hear her singing on this. Cause when you chasing a chick, your pockets looking like shit. So if you didn't know or didn't notice, when you start to get money, people blow your head up just like you was a blowfish. That's why I'm mashing them, passing them while saying blow this. KJ, and you know this, never on that whole shit, never give a whole kiss. But when I say focus, they seem to reappear and I didn't even notice. Focus is what I be when I'm on this MIC, and I do it blatantly. Serious what you taking me? Yeah, he tried to play me yellow. Yeah, he tried to lay for me, but real niggas relate and fuck niggas hate. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air and I'm out this bitch, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air and I'm out this bitch. Now if you feel me, gon' turn it up. And if you don't, shit, I don't give a fuck. Now if you feel me, throw your hands up. And if you don't, I ain't worried about it. I don't give a fuck, cause it's my rain and I'm telling it. Hope you brought your umbrella. Bring the pain in any weather, whenever, however, whatever's clever. Can you dig it with the shovel that you not on the level? Now you got a vendetta, cold with your thin sweater. Now
Hey, you still there?
I get it, cause I see the war in you. Yeah, cause talk's cheap and it's affordable. Now I got the feeling that they gon' be hating on your name. Look, you ain't gon' stop it, and it ain't gon' change, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air, and I'm out this bitch, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Hey, you ain't got to worry about me. Don't worry about me, cause I ain't worried about shit. 2 fingers in the air, and I'm out this bitch.
And I'm out.
All right, all right. So I had to switch computers because it would not let me click to stop. But luckily I have a backup. But so hey, we thank y'all for tuning in. We'll put in the edits and all that, and we're out here.
Holla.